fellow gamers, Peter here from the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Welcome! Today we're going to talk about Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team Into the Dark. Yes, we're going to get down and dirty in the depths of the dangerous space hulk called the Gallo Dark. Into the Dark is the new set for Kill Team by Games Workshop. It's set aboard an ancient space hulk floating in space, and we've got two teams, the Imperial Navy Breaches and the Kroot Kin Band, and they're going to be fighting for supremacy within the dark corridors of the space hulk. And for that we've got some fantastic new terrain which I've painted up and I'm going to show you in detail. We've got the two teams, we've got all the other stuff for Kill Team. Let's check it out. Now, of course, Games Workshop sent me this set for free so I could show it to you, but of course my opinions are my own. So I'll be telling you what I think of this set, and I'm going to do things a bit differently this time. I'm not going to go through the whole unboxing and all that stuff. You'll be able to see what you get in the set. Instead, I'm going to talk about the rules, I'm going to show off the terrain, and we're just going to have a good old chinwag about this new set. So strap yourself in, get ready, and let's get started. Now I know what you want to see. You want to see the terrain, because let's face it, this is the really distinctive thing about this set, is this beautiful space hulk corridor terrain, and it is really gorgeous. As you can see, it's covered in huge amounts of gubbins, all kinds of control panels and dials and switches and vents and things like that. It's just brilliant. There's so much detail on these things. And actually, it took me quite a while to paint. I thought I'd be able to do it pretty quickly, but in the end, I was so fascinated by all the detail that I spent more time on it than I thought I would. The set also comes with a lovely selection of barricades and various bits and bobs that you can use to break up the corridor terrain a little bit. There are also some really nice overhead pipes as well, broken pipes and overhead pipes. Control panels, storage containers, barricades, all kinds of things. It's a lovely selection of terrain. And the great thing about this terrain is that it fits together really sturdily and well. As you can see, these caps that go on top of where the joins happen keep things very snugly attached. And then you can also put in various other things like these tanks. They can actually attach into the join and then all be held in place by the cap piece. So the whole thing is very sturdy. In fact, once you've set up the terrain, you could lift the whole selection of corridors off the board in one piece. It all stays together. Now, if you're wondering what my recipe was for painting this terrain, let me tell you. First, I undercoated everything with black. So Chaos Black spray. Then I did a rough dry brush of everything with Dark Reaper. So that gives it that nice dark blue-grey tone. When that was dry, I gave it a very light edge dry brush with Fenrisian grey, just to pick up the edges of all the shapes. All the metal areas, or most of the metal areas, were painted with lead belcher. I think I used a bronze colour on a few bits here and there as well, so you might want to use one of the bronze colours to just break up the metallics a little bit. That got a little bit of a highlight with Rune Fang Steel, just a very subtle little highlight to give a bit of depth to the metals. When all that was dry, of course, good old Agrax Earthshade washed over all the metallic areas to give it that oily, dark kind of wash. And then when that was dry, Scrag Brown. Scrag Brown is really your friend when it comes to rusting up your metals. If you water it down a lot, I not only put it over the metallic areas, but also over the blue areas as well, or the dark blue areas. So lots and lots of Scrag Brown there to make everything look rusty. And you can just drag it very roughly over the metals to look like running rust, and round all the little bolts, everything, everywhere. Good old Scrag Brown. It's great for your rust effects. And then finally, I used here some pigments. So this is powdered pigment. You can get this from various manufacturers, and it's really handy for adding some dirt and dust. And as you can see, I used a lot of that on the bottom areas, especially of everything, just to make it look like it was dusty and dirty at the base, and also sometimes over the metals as well. And it just gives a bit of depth to that, makes it really sit on the base nicely, and makes everything look dirty and grotty. So you rub that in with a brush, and it just gives you that great effect. And then finally, when all that was done, I sprayed them with a varnish. Now the varnish is going to make that pigment sit back a little bit. It won't look quite as good once you've varnished it, but it's still quite effective. As you can see, it works really well on that door in those lower areas there. So give everything a varnish. I used Tamiya clear varnish, which has a very, very slight glossy finish to it, but not much. As you can see, it's just right for this terrain. And there you have it. Very easy to do, but of course you're going to be spending quite a bit of time doing all these tiny little details. I think it was Rune Lord brass I used for those brass effects. So you can see the plate there is in brass. It just gives a bit of variety to things. Also, you can go to town on painting little dials and things like that if you want to. It's up to you. You can also do little green glowing lights. And if you're crazy like me, you'll go and paint all the different wires and things different colours as well. Now let's have a look at the two factions that you get in the Into the Dark set. You've got here the Imperial Navy breaches, and as you can see, the usual high quality Games Workshop figures, absolutely beautiful detailed figures. And then you've got the Farstalker Kin Band, which are the Kroot, who usually hang around with the Tau, but in this case they're on their own and investigating the Gallowdark by themselves. Now I must apologise for not painting up these miniatures, but I spent so much time painting the terrain, I haven't yet had the time to paint these. And of course in the box you get the usual measuring templates, various counters, 2 decks of cards, TAC Ops cards, and you've got the core book, which is pretty much exactly the same as the last core book. I don't think they've changed anything in there. And then you've got the Into the Dark book, which gives you the special rules on these two factions, all the adventure material, the rules for fighting within the Space Hulk, that kind of thing. So let's talk about Kill Team, and I'm just going to ramble on a little bit here because I played this the other day and I really enjoyed it, but I do have all kinds of different thoughts. One is that, as you already know, Games Workshop games are lifestyle games. They take up a lot of time, a lot of effort. You really want to play them quite a few times to get the maximum amount of enjoyment out of them because, you know, they're very expensive, but also they're very complex. So the more you play them, the more you get to know your various miniatures and what they can do and all their different abilities. Now, because this is Kill Team, every one of your miniatures is going to have its own set of stats. It's going to have its own set of special abilities and special things that it does during the game. So there's a lot to take in, especially when you start playing. And what I had to do is make these quite detailed reference sheets so I could keep track of it all. But not only do you have to keep track of all that, but you also have to keep track of a very large series of different ploys which they have in this game. So you've got strategic ploys. You can play a strategic ploy once per round. And by the way, they call it turning point in this game instead of round, which drives me bonkers. It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Everybody knows 2 turns make a round. Why call it a turning point? It's long-winded and silly, and I just think it's the worst decision ever. But that's just me. Drives me nuts. Turning point. Ridiculous. Anyway, per round, each person can play one strategic ploy. So you've got one special thing you can do. That's great. Now, during the game, of course, you also have tactical ploys. Now, the tactical ploys are the things that you can do during your turn. So they're far more specific and give you various abilities and advantages as you play your turn. So to be able to use these various abilities, you spend command points and you get a number of those each turn. Now, the thing is, not only are you keeping track of all the special abilities of each one of your operatives, but you also have to keep track of all the different strategic ploys and tactical ploys you have. And this is a lot to stick into your head in one game. It's a lot. And you also have faction-specific strategic ploys and tactical ploys. And then on top of all that, you've got equipment. You can buy different equipment as well. All of this is faction-specific on the most part. So this is a great way of giving each faction its own feel, but it is a lot to load into your brain. So this is one issue I have with this game. Even though it is enjoyable, I did enjoy the game that I played, and there are things I love about the system, which I'm going to go into in more detail. The one thing I just want to say up front is that it is a cognitive load. You've got to take on quite a lot. And of course, as you play it more often, you're going to get to know each one of your operatives and what they can do, and it'll get easier. But adding these tactical ploys and strategic ploys is another level of complexity, another level of things you've got to remember. And you will find yourself many, many times going, oh, if only I'd done that thing then. Of course, a lot of them are just very small things. They might give you, a +1 to hit or whatever, just some tiny advantage. So I sometimes wonder whether the load that you have to take on to remember all these things is worth the tiny advantages that they give you. And I think, well, okay, it does give the factions their own character, but is it too much information for too little gameplay return? And I'd really like to hear your opinions on this. I'm curious myself. I haven't really come up with a decision on that. I do know one thing though, is that as I'm getting older and I'm playing more and more games, I like things to be a little bit simpler and more elegant. And this is Games Workshop. They've done this from the start. This is how they design games. They add lots and lots of special abilities, and now there's lots of command points and things you can buy with command points. And a lot of people love that kind of thing because they love getting into the nitty-gritty of their factions and remembering all the special abilities they've got and everything. So if you love that kind of thing, good on you. Fantastic. I just find it a little bit heavy sometimes, especially when I'm jumping from game to game and I have to remember all the different rules for all the different games. So that's just one thing. Now let's talk about some good things about this system. I really like what they've done with the combat system here. It's straightforward and simple and much better than the core systems that we've had for Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40,000 for ages. And that is, of course, the thing that I've complained about many, many times in the past, which is roll to hit, roll to wound, roll to save. Too many dice, too much dice rolling, and it just takes up too much time, and after a while it just gets boring. This is the one problem I've always had with Games Workshop games, well, the big two Games Workshop games anyway. And I love the fact that they are doing these games and they are simplifying these systems, but they're still fun. And what they've done is that it's all down to hits and critical hits. You do a critical hit on a 6 when you roll a dice, and you roll a number of dice equal to your attack value. You need a certain amount to hit, and you put the dice aside, you put your normal hits aside, and you put your criticals aside, and then the player you're attacking rolls their defense dice. They roll a number of defense dice, they need to hit a certain number, which is their save value, and they put aside their normal hits and their critical hits. And then the defending player can negate hits, and they can use a normal save to negate a normal hit, they can use a critical hit to negate a critical hit, or they can use 2 normal saves to negate a critical hit. And so they negate what they can, and whatever's left, they do the damage. And the damage of the weapon is either normal damage or critical damage. Super simple. 2 dice rolls, an attacking dice roll and a defense dice roll, and you've got it. And it's slightly interesting because you've got the critical hits, so there's different things can happen. There's a lot of excitement in that dice roll, and it doesn't need 3 sets of dice rolls to get to a result. Absolutely love it. I think it's great. Similarly, when you get to hand-to-hand combat, they've made it a little bit interesting. You both roll to hit, and then with each one of your hits, starting with the attacker, you get to decide whether you want to strike or parry. Now, if you parry, you get to negate one of the opponent's hits, and if you strike, you get to do damage. So there's a little bit of decision-making process there. It makes the battles a bit more interactive, a bit more interesting. Again, it's simple. Hardly any die rolls, a simple resolution system, some interactivity between the players. It's fantastic. I really like how they're doing that. The other elephant in the room when it came to Kill Team was the system of using these movement templates, which has divided things up into various distances denoted by symbols. So you can see on this template that 1 inch is a triangle, 3 inches is a square, 2 inches is a circle. Now, I'm still really annoyed about the fact of the graphic design faux pas of deciding that 3 inches isn't a triangle and 4 inches isn't a square and a circle isn't 1 inch. It would have been super simple and easier to remember. For some strange reason, they assigned things like a triangle to 1 inch. I don't get why they did that. However, this system does work pretty well, and it works well in the confines of the Space Hulk where it's quite cramped. It's very easy to get these little things in there and measure distances instead of using a tape measure. So I quite like this. It's great. I just think they just assigned the wrong symbols to the distances. Now, talking about rules, I've made my own rules summary and reference for this game. There's a reference sheet as well as the rules summary. Go to my website. You can download these at orderofgamers.com. Now, the great thing is that Games Workshop is starting to release light versions of their rules online as well. So if you go online, they've done a light version of this. I still think my rules summary is better, but it's great to see Games Workshop starting to release their rules like this. And they're also doing things like releasing free factions, like the Intercessor Space Marine faction they've released online as well. You can download it from their website, the community website. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Great to see that kind of thing happening from Games Workshop finally. Now, one thing I was surprised to see is that there aren't a lot of special rules or additions for playing within the Gallo Dark in these confined environments. Basically, they've added a few more actions. There's a guard action, which is kind of like Overwatch, and that's another thing that I find a little bit difficult about Killzone, is that the Overwatch system is kind of weird. Basically, Overwatch in most games means that you use your action to put a miniature on some form of guard, so if something happens in your opponent's turn, you get to react to it and take a shot or do something like that. In this one, there's a system where if you run out of activating operatives before the other player, you get to reactivate operatives who have already activated during your turn and take a shot with them. And I find this really weird because I don't see any restrictions on who can take this shot. So presumably if your heavy weapon guy has got lined up for a good shot and you've run out of activating people and your opponent activates someone, you can take a shot with your most powerful ranged weapon. Now, I checked this and checked this, so if I've got this wrong, please tell me, but it seems like a strange system. It's not really Overwatch as I have come to know it. So this guard action is really kind of Overwatch, basically. You can go on guard and do the same things that you used to do with Overwatch in other games. Bit of confusing terminology, but then they seem very keen in fiddling with terminology in this game by calling models operatives and rounds turning points and things like that. Anyway, there's another action which is hatchway fight, which basically allows you to close combat someone on the other side of a hatchway. And there's operate hatch, so you can open a hatch up during the game. And there's also a few rules for the fact that the environment is condensed, so area effect weapons are going to be more effective. There's a few changes to the tac ops that you can use during the game, and then there's some specific rules for the types of terrain. So all in all, very simple, and I was kind of surprised that they didn't really have to change too much. As I said, I think it's just the levels of complexity on top of that with all the special abilities and various tac ops and ploys and things like that that make this something that is quite complicated. So rewarding, but you're going to have to put a little bit of effort in. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this look at Kill Team Into the Dark. As you can see, the terrain is spectacular and definitely worth getting. I think it's beautiful. I really enjoyed painting it up and it's a pleasure to play with. The miniatures themselves are excellent as well. The rules changes are just enough to add something to the game, but without changing the core rules too much. I think it's a lovely set. Games Workshop are really committed to this version of Kill Team. They've already announced 3 more sets set upon the Gallo Dark, so lots more Space Hulk type action. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed this look at Kill Team Into the Dark. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit all notifications. Of course, visit my website at orderofgamers.com where you'll find hundreds of rules summaries. Follow me on social media. And if you want to support the channel, I've got a Patreon channel. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.